For months now, various arms of the Trump administration have been quietly and sometimes quite aggressively promoting Christian nationalism on social media accounts. There are scores of these recruitment posts across the social media pages for DHS, for example, but it goes way beyond just one department. Look at the Labor Department's page. Experts in Christian nationalism and white nationalism believe that what you're seeing here, the themes, they're no coincidence. For example, they keep making posts like these with exactly 14 words and sometimes exactly 88 characters. Experts in neo-Nazis and Groyper movements, they say that these numbers, 14 and 88, are references to neo-Nazi slogans, and posts with 14 words can be used as a sort of quiet way for Nazis to find each other online. These are only 3 examples that you're seeing here, but there are a lot of posts with these themes online. And then there's this post 3 days after ICE killed Renee Good. The Labor Department tweeted, quote, "One homeland, one people, one heritage. Remember who you are, American." NBC News reported that many people said it bore similarities to a Nazi slogan that translates to one people, one empire, one leader. We reached out to DHS for comment. Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin called the comparisons, quote, revolting, and called us, quote, conspiracy theorists for giving this credibility. Joining us now, Bradley Onishi. He's co-host of the Straight White American Jesus podcast and author of Preparing for War. Brad, it's good to see you and have you back on the show again. So, often when we as reporters try to talk about these issues, there can be this pushback or criticism that talking about white Christian nationalism, it's part of the edgy online narrative. It sort of exists there, but it's not really part of real life. But just days ago, a report from the Texas Observer shows that ICE is allowing a guy named James Rawdon to continue to work as a prosecutor in their Dallas courtrooms right now, despite the fact that he ran a social media account that said things like, "America is a white nation, and all blacks are foreign to my people." So I guess my question for you as an academic, as an expert in this space is all of this really just a coincidence?
It's really hard to believe it's a coincidence when these instances keep happening. So we just had the example of James Rawdon, the ICE prosecutor. In the fall, we had the Nazi group chat that was leaked that included young Republican leaders in their 20s and 30s who said things like, "I love Hitler." Another story from last fall was about a Heritage Foundation economist who said, who had a deep appreciation for Nazi warships and often used them in his Zoom accounts and talked about German victimhood in World War II. These coincidences keep piling up. And then when you couple these instances with the social media posts, which are curated, I mean, these are artisanal, not accidental posts. They require a deep knowledge of these online spaces, the white nationalist and Christian nationalist spaces. You start to see something that I think we have to take away at this moment. This is not an accident. This is who they are. And this is the message that they want Americans, and especially the recruits that they're trying to find for ICE. This is the message they want them to see.
Brad, one of the big debates that I think has been going on about Trump and his supporters and the MAGA movement, at least since we started covering Donald Trump when he entered the political scene in 2015, was about whether the appeal of Donald Trump was about economic anxiety or about something darker and related to racism and the way that his xenophobic instincts and the way that he talked about non-white people. To me, I think that those two explanations are actually in some ways mutually reinforcing, in the sense that there are people out there who feel like they've been left behind, that their material conditions have deteriorated, and because Donald Trump cannot improve their economic status, he offers them this instead, right? The ability to scapegoat the people who are, in fact, keeping you down, who are keeping you out of good jobs, and who are making things more expensive. This administration blames immigrants for the cost of housing and everything else. I'm wondering how you see those two forces. Do you also see a connection between, the frustration with affordability issues and economic outcomes and the increasing amplification of what seems to be white nationalist rhetoric by members of this administration.
I agree with you that this is a both-and situation. There are folks in the 2024 election, particularly Latino and Black voters, who said explicitly that they were voting for a more affordable economy, a more affordable way of life in the United States. However, there are also many folks in the decade that Trump has been in public life and presidential politics who are part of white grievance spaces online. And one of the things that I think goes without saying these days, but I guess is worth saying out loud one more time, is that Donald Trump's tactics, whenever possible, are not to appeal to anyone's better angels, not to find a way for America to strive forward together, but as you said, to scapegoat the most vulnerable and to deepen, to widen, and to inflame the passions of those who are looking for someone that they can blame for the life they think that is no longer theirs. That is what I see in these social media posts. That is what I saw in the response to the killing of Renee Good. And once again, these are not one-off instances. This is a system now. It is not an accident.
Brad, let's talk about Nazis. I have been very disturbed by kind of the creeping revisionist history of what Nazi Germany was, what the Nazis did, that Hitler as a leader was anything but a genocidal maniac. But you do see it creeping out in corridors of online right conversation, and occasionally among a prominent commentator, some kind of history of this sort. Can you talk about how we have gotten to this place where this kind of history is even being discussed as mildly appropriate?
I remember sitting with a Republican colleague in 2016, and both of us were concerned because we remarked 10 years ago that the generation that experienced World War II was sort of fading into the sunset. They were becoming older, some of them were passing away, and we worried about collective memory on this front when it came to Nazism, when it came to the Holocaust. And 10 years later, we see this revisionist history soaring to the front. And it's strategic. It serves a very specific purpose, that if you can ameliorate these histories, if you can make these stories out to be ones of a great leader with resolve who cared about his people, rather than a genocidal maniac who is bent on eradicating a certain people, then you can arrive at a place where you can admire those tactics. You can admire the ways that a strong man can order the social hierarchy, take control of a country, and supposedly make it great again. The revisionist history is a history with a purpose, and we're only going to see more of it in the future. The stunning thing is, it now seems to be coming from official government accounts, DHS, labor, and so on.
Brad Onishi, thank you.
Thank you.